In every family, I think. There are two kinds of siblings, the savers and the spenders. I was, and have always been. The saver. I'm the kind of person who packs a lunch for work, who drives a 10-year-old car that's fully paid off, and who gets a quiet, deep satisfaction from watching my savings account grow, dollar by diligent dollar. That money wasn't just a number on a screen. It was my future. It was a down payment on a house. It was security. It was the result of a decade of hard work and sacrifice. My older brother, Leo, was the spender. Oh, he was a brilliant spender, a visionary spender. He was handsome, charismatic, and blessed with a golden tongue that could talk anyone into anything. He was a serial entrepreneur, always chasing his next can't-miss idea that was going to change the world and make us all rich. And he was brilliant at spending other people's money, specifically mine. For years, I had been his personal, private, and very reluctant bank, and he was about to try and make one final, massive withdrawal. A withdrawal so brazen it would change our family forever. He had no idea that the collateral he was about to offer would end up costing him everything. If you've ever had a family member who sees your hard-earned savings as their personal slush fund, you're in the right place. Our dynamic was set in childhood. I was the responsible one who saved my allowance to buy a bicycle. Leo was the one who spent his on candy and then borrowed my bike and promptly crashed it. My parents' solution was always the same. Clara, just let him use it. He's your brother. You have to share. Don't be selfish. As we got older, the stakes just got higher. Leo's brilliant ideas were a revolving door of failure. There was the gourmet food truck he bought, which never passed a single health inspection and now sits rusting in a storage lot. There was the line of artisanal, eco-friendly t-shirts, for which he spent thousands on designing a logo, but never actually got around to printing any shirts. Each time, the venture would collapse, and he would come to me, his eyes full of a charming, boyish despair, his hands out, and each time the responsible one, would say no, and each time my parents would intervene. I remember the algae farm incident about 2 years ago. Leo had become convinced that farming high-protein spirulina in our parents' swimming pool was the future of sustainable food. He needed $5,000 for initial equipment. I, of course, said no. That evening, I got the call, a family meeting, an intervention aimed not at my brother's ludicrous, half-baked scheme, but at my lack of support. "Clara, honey," my mother began, her voice a familiar cocktail of disappointment and gentle guilt. "He's your brother. You have to believe in his dreams. You're so good with money, and you have all those savings just sitting there. He just needs a little help to get this off the ground. It's what family does." "Clara," my father added, chiming in on cue. "We help each other out. We lift each other up. Don't be so selfish with your money. You can't take it with you." They were a well-oiled machine, experts at emotional and financial blackmail. And, as always, I caved. I wrote him the check. The algae farm, predictably, lasted 6 weeks, until my mother complained it was turning her pool green. And my father paid a man to come and drain it. The $5,000 was never mentioned again. But after that, something inside me hardened. I was done. I had spent my entire adult life working as a pediatric nurse, a demanding, emotionally taxing, but deeply rewarding job. The money I had saved was my own. It was the result of thousands of 12-hour shifts, of holidays spent in a hospital, of a quiet, frugal life. It was my security. It was my future. And I was done letting my brother's reckless fantasies and my parents' enabling behavior chip away at it. I finally set a real, hard boundary. I told all 3 of them that the Bank of Clara was permanently closed. The loans were over. The result was a year of strained, chilly silence. My refusal to continue funding Leo's lifestyle was seen as a deep, personal betrayal. I was selfish. I was unsupportive. I wasn't being a good sister or a good daughter. The guilt trips were relentless, but for the first time, I held firm. And then, Leo came to me with the big one, the idea to end all ideas. He showed up at my small apartment, looking more passionate and more convincing than I had ever seen him. He had a full presentation on his laptop, a company called Viridian Dynamics. It was a green tech startup. he explained, with a revolutionary new patent for water purification. "This is it, Clara," he said, his eyes shining with a feverish intensity. "This isn't a food truck or an algae farm. This is real. I have a real patent, a real business plan. This is going to be huge, bigger than any of us can imagine." He told me he had poured every last cent of his own money into it. He showed me the impressive-looking, though likely fake letters of intent from potential investors. He had a whole story, a whole believable world built around this company. "But I've hit a temporary cash flow problem," he said, his voice dropping. "I just need one final injection of capital to get us through the next 6 months, to finalize the prototype and secure the first round of major investment. After that, we're golden." "How much?" I asked, my arms crossed, my heart already hardening. He took a deep breath. $100,000. I almost laughed. It was nearly every penny I had saved in my entire life. "No, Leo," I said simply. "Clara, please," he begged. "This is different, I swear it. This is the one." "The answer is no," I repeated. "I told you, the bank is closed." I thought that would be the end of it, but the next day, the phone rang. It was my mother, and she was crying. A family meeting had been called. The full court press was about to begin. They weren't just going to ask for the money this time. They were going to demand it, and my brother, my charming, manipulative brother, had a new trick up his sleeve, a trick that seemed so safe, so responsible, so ironclad, that it would ultimately lead to my ruin. Or so he thought. The family meeting was, as I had predicted, an ambush. It was held in my parents' living room, a space that always felt more like a courtroom for my life choices. Leo was there with his sleek laptop, ready to give the performance of a lifetime. My parents were sitting on the sofa opposite me, their faces arranged in identical masks of loving, parental concern. I was the defendant, and my life savings were on trial. Leo launched into his presentation for Viridian Dynamics. It was a slick, impressive performance, full of charts, graphs, and all the right buzzwords. He spoke of disrupting the water purification industry, of paradigm-shifting technology, of a scalable, synergistic business model. He was selling a beautiful, glittering dream, and my parents were his most eager customers. When he was finished, my mother turned to me, her eyes shining with unshed tears of pride. "Clara, honey," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "look at him. Look at what he's built. This is different. He's not a boy with a hobby anymore. He's a man with a vision. He's not asking for a handout. He's offering you the investment opportunity of a lifetime." "Your mother is right," my father chimed in, his voice taking on its familiar, booming tone of paternal authority. "This is your brother's big shot. Clara, he could be the next Elon Musk. Are you really going to be the one who stands in the way of that? Is that who you want to be? The sister who said no. Family has to have faith in each other." The pressure was immense. They were framing my financial prudence as a moral failing, but I held my ground. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I can't. It's my entire life savings. It's the down payment for my house. It's my retirement. It's my security. It's too much of a risk. I love you, Leo, but your track record isn't exactly stellar." Leo's handsome face crumpled into a mask of wounded betrayal. It was a look he had perfected over years of practice. "A risk?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You think I'm a risk after all this work? After everything I've put into this? You think I would risk your money?" He stood up and began to pace the room dramatically. "Fine," he said, running a hand through his hair. "You think it's a risk. You want security. I'll give you security. I'll give you the most secure investment you could ever ask for." He stopped in front of me, his eyes blazing with a new, theatrical fire. "I'll put up my house as collateral," he declared. My parents both gasped. "My house is paid off," Leo continued, his voice ringing with a noble, self-sacrificing grandeur. "It's worth more than double what I'm asking for. There is literally zero risk for you. Clara, if, in the absolute worst case of all worst-case scenarios, the company fails, which it won't, you get my house. You don't just get your money back, you double it. How's that for a safe investment?" I was stunned. It was an incredible gesture, so incredible, in fact, that a small warning bell went off in the back of my mind. It seemed too good to be true. My parents, however, were completely sold. They were looking at their son as if he were a knight from a fairy tale, bravely offering up his own castle to prove his worth. "Oh, Leo," my mother cried. That's the most honorable thing I have ever heard. See, Clara, he's serious. He's betting everything he has on this. 2. To make it all seem even more official, Leo pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I had my lawyer draw up a collateral agreement already," he said, sliding it across the coffee table to me. "It's all above board, ironclad." I opened the folder. The document looked official, full of dense legalese that I didn't fully understand. I was a nurse, not a lawyer. I saw the words collateral agreement at the top. I saw the address of his property. And I saw the term quitclaim deed. I vaguely assumed that was the legal term for a lien, a document that gives me a claim against the property if he were to default on the loan. It seemed logical, safe. I had no idea that a quitclaim deed wasn't a lien. I had no idea that it was a document that immediately transferred the entire ownership interest of the property from him to me. I had no idea that the moment he signed it, his house would legally, irrevocably, become my house. This was the heart of his deception, a piece of legal sleight of hand I was too trusting and too ignorant to see. I looked at my parents' beaming faces. I looked at my brother's earnest, pleading expression. The ironclad collateral had removed my last logical objection. To refuse now would make me look petty, spiteful, and truly, unforgivably selfish. My own responsible nature had been used as a weapon against me, against my better judgment, against every screaming instinct in my gut. I heard myself whisper the word that would cost me everything. Okay, the relief in the room was a physical thing. My parents hugged me, Leo hugged me, telling me I wouldn't regret it, that I was the best sister in the world. The next day, we met at a notary's office. We both signed the documents. His signature on the quitclaim deed was confident and quick. My signature on the loan agreement was shaky. Then, I went to my bank. I sat with the manager and initiated the wire transfer. I watched as the number in my savings account, the beautiful, comforting number that represented a decade of my life's work, drained away, leaving behind nothing but a few $100s. I walked out of the bank feeling hollowed out, a profound sense of dread settling over me like a shroud. But I kept telling myself it was okay. I had been a good sister, I had been a good daughter, and my investment was safe. After all, I had the collateral, I had his house. The 6 months that followed the signing of the papers were a strange, surreal time. My life savings were gone, but in their place was a fragile, unfamiliar sense of hope. Leo, my brother, was a whirlwind of activity and infectious optimism. He was finally, truly, building his dream. The updates he gave were always glowing, if a little vague on the specifics. "Things are incredible, Clara," he'd say over the phone, his voice buzzing with energy. "We're on the verge of a major breakthrough with the prototype. I just hired 2 top-tier engineers. We're in talks with a major distributor in Asia," he'd announce at Sunday dinner. "This thing is going to be global." My parents were ecstatic. They treated my brother like a returning war hero. My father, who had once been so worried, now walked around with a proud, smug smile, telling all his friends that his son, the visionary, was about to change the world. They started talking about the vacations they would take, the new car my mother wanted. They were spending the profits before there were any, and they treated me with a new, patronizing kindness. Their looks no longer held pity for my boring life, but a sort of smug validation for their own wisdom. "See, Clara," my mother said to me one afternoon, "aren't you glad you had faith in your brother? Aren't you glad you listened to us?" I felt a quiet, growing guilt over my initial hesitation. I had doubted him, I had doubted them, but it seemed like their blind faith, for once, had been right. Leo was really doing it. He was succeeding, and I had helped make it possible. I even noticed he was living a more lavish lifestyle. He had a new, expensive car. He was wearing designer clothes. When I asked him about it, he just laughed. "You have to project an image of success to be successful, little sister," he'd said. "It's all a necessary business expense." It made sense. I told myself I wanted to believe it so badly that I did. I ignored the small, quiet warning bells in the back of my mind. I ignored the fact that his updates were always about potential, never about actual, concrete sales. I let myself be swept up in their collective fantasy. The phone call that shattered that fantasy came on a rainy Tuesday night. It was Leo, and he was sobbing. His voice was so choked with tears I could barely understand him. "Clara," he wept. Can I come over? Something terrible has happened." My heart leaped into my throat. "Leo, what is it? What's wrong?" "Just, please," he sobbed. "I need to talk to you." He showed up at my apartment 20 minutes later. He was a complete wreck. His hair was disheveled. His eyes were red and swollen, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. He collapsed onto my sofa, his head in his hands. He was the very picture of a broken man. "What happened?" I asked, my own voice trembling as I knelt beside him. He told me a long, complicated, and devastatingly convincing story. It was a perfect storm of disaster. He explained, their key supplier for a proprietary component had gone out of business without warning. A major investor, the one from Asia, had gotten cold feet and pulled out at the last second, and to make matters worse, a rival company had just launched a similar product, effectively stealing their market share before they could even launch. It all just fell apart. He sobbed, his shoulders shaking. "Everything, in the span of a week. It's all gone. Clara, the company is worthless. We have to declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy." The word bankruptcy hung in the air, a cold, heavy stone. I just stared at him, my mind unable to process the news. "The money," I finally whispered. "My money." He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the floor, his face a mask of shame and despair. "I am so sorry, Clara," he choked out. "It's all gone. Every penny. It was all tied up in R&D, in the new office lease, in the marketing budget. There's nothing left. The lawyers said the creditors get everything first. There's nothing for the shareholders, for you. My life savings, a decade of my hard work, my sacrifice, my careful planning, gone, in an instant." I felt a wave of nausea so intense I had to grip the edge of the coffee table to steady myself. But then a small, selfish thought broke through my shock. The collateral, the house. "But the house, Leo," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The collateral. You said I would get the house if anything went wrong." He finally looked up at me, his eyes brimming with fresh, pathetic tears. He shook his head slowly. "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought so, too. I really did. But I just spoke to the bankruptcy lawyers. They told me that because the house was used as collateral to secure a loan for the business. It's considered a corporate asset, and the business creditors' claims come first. The bank that funded our equipment lease, they get the house. It's being seized. I'm losing everything. Clara," he wailed. "I'm going to be homeless." His words were the final, killing blow. Not only was my money gone, but my ironclad guarantee was worthless. And worse, much worse, was the new, crushing weight of guilt. Here was my brother, his own life in ruins, having lost everything. And my first thought had been about my own selfish security. I felt like a terrible, awful sister. I had doubted him. I had protected myself. And I had been right to. But now, seeing his devastation, all I felt was a profound, misplaced guilt. I spent the next hour comforting him, my own financial ruin a secondary concern to his theatrical, all-consuming grief. He was the tragic hero of this story, and I was just the supporting character who had lost her investment. He finally left my apartment around midnight, leaving me alone in the quiet of my living room. I sat on the sofa, a hollowed-out shell of a woman. My future, the one I had so carefully built, had been demolished. I wasn't just broke, I was emotionally devastated. The one time I had bet on my brother, the one time I had allowed myself to have faith, it had all blown up in my face. I believed him. I believed every single word of his tragic, convincing story. I had no idea that I hadn't just been the victim of a failed business. I had just been the victim of the most ruthless, calculated, and successful con of my brother's entire life. The days following Leo's tearful confession were a thick, suffocating fog of grief and guilt. I was devastated. My life savings, the product of a decade of grueling 12-hour shifts, of holidays spent under the harsh fluorescent lights of a hospital, of 1,000 small sacrifices. It was all gone. And my brother's dream, the one I had finally, reluctantly, allowed myself to believe in, had been shattered. My parents, of course, rallied around him. He was their tragic hero, the brave visionary who had dared to dream and had lost everything. They called me daily, not to see how I was coping with my own financial ruin, but to admonish me for not being more supportive of my brother in his time of need. "You need to call him, Clara," my mother would say, her voice full of disappointment. "His heart is broken. He feels so guilty about your money. He needs to know that you forgive him, that you don't blame him." I did blame him, but I also blamed myself. I felt a deep, gnawing guilt for ever having doubted him, for demanding the collateral, for thinking of my own security when he was supposedly facing ruin. I was a mess, but even through the fog of my grief, a small, persistent detail from his story started to bother me. It was a tiny inconsistency, the kind of thing a nurse, trained to notice subtle changes in a patient's story, would pick up on. He had mentioned that the bank that funded his equipment lease was the primary creditor seizing his house. But I remembered him telling me months ago that he had bought all his equipment outright to avoid taking on business loans. It was a small thing, a detail he probably thought I would forget, but I hadn't. And it was a loose thread, and my professional instincts, the part of my brain that is analytical and meticulous, couldn't help but pull on it. My investigation started simply with a public records search. I sat at my laptop late one night and went to the federal court website. I searched for the bankruptcy filing for Viridian Dynamics, LLC, in our state. Nothing. I expanded the search to the entire country. Still nothing. A cold, strange feeling began to creep up my spine. A company can't declare Chapter 7 bankruptcy without a public court filing. It's impossible. The fog of my grief began to clear, replaced by a sharp, cold suspicion. This wasn't a tragedy. This was a lie. The next day, I took the last few $1,000s I had on my credit card and I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a forensic accountant, a man named Mr. Davies, the same man my hospital used to investigate internal fraud. I told him the story, gave him copies of my loan agreement, and asked him to do one thing: follow the money. It took him less than 48 hours to uncover the truth. The report he sent me was a cold, factual, and utterly devastating account of my brother's monstrous betrayal. It was all there, laid out in black and white. My $100,000 had been wired into the corporate account for Viridian Dynamics. Then, over the next 2 weeks, a series of large payments had been made from that account to 3 other, newly created LLCs. The payments were listed as consulting fees and service agreements. The names of the LLCs were generic: Untraceable Things, Apex Holdings, Zenith Solutions, Keystone Management. Mr. Davies had traced the ownership of those LLCs. They were all registered to one person, my brother, Leo, but it was the next part of the report that made me feel physically ill. Mr. Davies had dug into Leo's personal spending, the fancy new car he was driving. He had bought it 2 months ago, with cash drawn from the Zenith Solutions account. He had a new, lavishly furnished apartment downtown that he was renting under a different name. And the final, damning evidence: a link to a private Instagram account. The account name was different, but the face was unmistakably my brother's. The feed was a highlight reel of the life he was living with my money. There he was, 3 months ago, on a beach in Mexico, raising a cocktail to the camera, with the caption, "Closing a big deal." Life is good. There he was, 2 months ago, at a Michelin-starred restaurant, a beautiful woman on his arm, and there he was, just last week, the week he had supposedly been devastated by his bankruptcy, at a high-stakes poker game in a casino. A huge pile of chips in front of him. He hadn't failed. He hadn't lost my money. He had methodically, deliberately, and gleefully stolen it. He had created a fake company, told a fake story, and performed a fake bankruptcy, all with the sole purpose of conning his own sister out of her entire life savings. I sat in front of my computer, staring at the picture of my smiling, carefree brother on a beach in Mexico. The grief and guilt I had been drowning in for weeks evaporated. burned away by a rage so pure, so absolute, so sublime. It was almost a religious experience. He hadn't just lied to me. He had tried to destroy me. He thought I was a naive, emotional nurse who wouldn't know how to fight back. He thought he had gotten away with it, scot-free. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea that in his desperation to seem trustworthy, in his haste to get his hands on my money, he had made one small, critical, and legally binding mistake. He had forgotten about the quitclaim deed. He had forgotten about the collateral. He thought he was a brilliant con man. He had no idea he was about to become his sister's tenant. The rage I felt after reading the investigator's report was a clean, purifying fire. It burned away the last of my grief, my guilt, and my misplaced love for my brother. All that was left was a cold, hard, and perfectly clear sense of purpose. He had started this war with a lie, and I was going to end it with the truth, an ironclad, legally binding truth. I didn't call him. I didn't send him an angry text. I drove to his house, the beautiful craftsman-style house in the upscale neighborhood that my life savings had supposedly been gambled for, the house he thought he had cleverly protected from me with his fake bankruptcy story. My house. He answered the door, a look of surprise on his face that quickly morphed into one of pity. He saw me standing on his doorstep, and he assumed I was there as a broken, destitute sister, coming to him for comfort or perhaps even a handout. "Clara," he said, his voice full of a thick, false concern. "What are you doing here? Are you okay?" "I'm not here for a hug, Leo," I said. My voice as cold as the November air, I walked past him into the living room. It was filled with new, expensive furniture, a massive leather sofa, a state-of-the-art entertainment system, the fruits of my stolen savings. "We need to talk about your bankruptcy," I said. Turning to face him, he immediately launched into his well-rehearsed performance. "Oh, Clara, I'm so sorry. I know you're devastated. I am too. I'm trying to pick up the pieces." "Stop," I said. "Just stop. The performance is over. I know." "Know what?" he asked, a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes. "I know about the shell corporations," I said, my voice quiet and even. "I know about Apex Holdings and Zenith Solutions. I know there was no bankruptcy filing because there was no bankruptcy. I know about the new car and the secret apartment and your little vacation to Mexico. I know you didn't lose my money, Leo. I know you stole it." I had expected him to deny it, to gaslight me, to call me hysterical, but he didn't. As I laid out the facts, his expression shifted from confusion to panic, and then, finally, to a smug, arrogant amusement. The mask was off. The con man was revealed. He let out a short, sharp laugh. "Okay," he said with a shrug, a cruel smirk on his handsome face. "So you figured it out. I have to admit, I'm impressed. You're smarter than I gave you credit for." "So what?" he continued, striding over to his new, ridiculously expensive wet bar and pouring himself a drink. "What are you going to do about it? Clara, sue me. It's your word against mine. The money is all tied up in a web of LLCs that would take a team of lawyers years to unravel. You can't touch me. I won. You should have just accepted that you lost your money in a failed business venture. It would have been less embarrassing for you." He truly believed he was untouchable. He believed he had committed the perfect crime. He leaned against his bar, sipping his scotch, looking at me with the smug, pitying contempt he had looked at me with my entire life. I let him finish his gloating monologue. I let him enjoy his perceived victory for one last, sweet moment. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a single, folded document. "You're right, Leo," I said calmly. "Suing you would be a long, messy, and expensive process, so I'm not going to do that. Luckily for me, we already have a legally binding agreement in place." I unfolded the document and placed it on his marble coffee table. It was the original, notarized quitclaim deed he had signed 6 months ago. He stared at it, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. "The collateral agreement I already told you, Clara. The house was seized by the creditors. It's gone. That piece of paper is worthless." And that's when I delivered the final, beautiful, checkmate move. "No, Leo," I said, a slow smile spreading across my face. "That's the part you got wrong, you see. I was so distraught after I gave you my money that I couldn't sleep. And that little legal term, quitclaim deed, kept bothering me, so I did something you never would have expected the naive little nurse to do. I called a lawyer, a very good one. The color started to drain from his face, and he explained to me, in very simple terms, what a quitclaim deed actually is. I continued, my voice as sweet as honey and as sharp as glass. He explained that it's not a lien against a property. It's not a promise of future ownership if a loan defaults. He explained that a quitclaim deed is an immediate and irrevocable transfer of all ownership interest, from the grantor to the grantee. I leaned forward. The moment you signed that paper, Leo, the moment that notary put her stamp on it, this house stopped being yours. It legally and instantly became mine. I let the words hang in the air as his brain struggled to catch up. It was never a part of your assets to be included in any bankruptcy. Real or fake, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. For the past 6 months, you haven't been a homeowner living lavishly on my stolen money. You've been a tenant, a squatter, living in my house, rent-free. The look on his face, it was a masterpiece. It was a symphony of dawning horror, of pure, abject terror. The trap he had so cleverly set for me had just snapped shut on his own leg. The ironclad guarantee he had offered up as a lie had been his undoing. So, I said, my voice now bright and businesslike as I reached back into my purse. Here's the deal. You have 2 options. Option A, you wire my $100,000 plus 6 months of interest back into my bank account by Friday at 5:00 p.m. I then pulled out another document. It was a standard rental agreement, which my lawyer had so kindly drafted for me this morning. Or, I said, sliding the lease agreement across the table towards him. You can choose option B. You can continue to live here, in my house, but rent is $3,000 a month. Payable on the first. I'll need first and last month's rent upfront, of course, and a security deposit. This month's rent, I added with a cheerful smile, is already late. He just stood there, speechless, staring at the quitclaim deed, then at the lease agreement, a man completely and utterly defeated. The con man had been out-conned. The charming dreamer had just crashed into a legal reality he never saw coming. I stood up and walked to the door. Your choice, Leo, I said. But either way, I'm getting my money back. I'll expect to hear from you. Try not to be late. I walked out of my new house, leaving my brother standing amidst the ruins of his perfect crime. I was no longer his victim. I was his landlord. I walked out of my new house and didn't look back. The rage that had propelled me through the confrontation began to subside, leaving in its place a quiet, cold, and immensely satisfying sense of peace. I had been a victim. He had made me a victim, but I had refused to stay one. I had used my own mind, my own resolve, and his own careless arrogance to turn his perfect crime into his own personal prison. As I had predicted, my phone rang less than an hour later. It was my mother. She was hysterical. Clara, what is the meaning of this? She shrieked into the phone. Leo just called me. He's a complete mess. He said you're trying to take his house after everything he's been through. How could you be so cruel? For years, a phone call like this would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. I would have felt a desperate need to smooth things over, to keep the peace. But the old Clara, the family peacemaker, was gone. Mom, I said, my voice calm and even. Leo is not the victim here. He is a con man who stole my entire life savings. The house is mine, legally. I am not being cruel. I am enforcing a contract that he signed willingly. But he's your brother, she wailed. This isn't how family is supposed to act. We're supposed to support each other. Is that what you call this? Mom, and I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Is lying to me for months while he spent my money on vacations and sports cars support? Is faking a bankruptcy to steal from his own sister support? This family's definition of support seems to be a one-way street, leading directly from my bank account to his, and that street is now permanently closed. You have to fix this. Clara? My father's voice boomed from the background. You've made your point. Now you give him back his house. That's an order. An order? After all this? They still thought they could order me around. I let out a small, cold laugh. No, I said simply. I am done taking orders from this family. Leo has two options, and only two. He returns my money, with interest, by Friday at 5 p.m., or he signs a lease and starts paying rent. There are no other options. My decision is final. I added one last thing before she could reply. And if you, or Dad, or anyone else calls me again to try and pressure me about this, I will block your numbers. We are done. I hung up the phone. The week that followed was a tense, silent war of nerves. I knew my brother. I knew his pride, his arrogance. I knew he would never believe I would actually go through with it. He would assume, as he always had, that eventually, good old responsible Clara would cave. He would wait me out. Friday came. I watched my bank account all day. 4 p.m. came and went, then 4:30. At 5 p.m. The bank closed. The money was not there. He had called my bluff. He had made a very, very big mistake. On Monday morning, I made a single phone call to my lawyer. He missed the deadline, I said. Please begin the formal eviction proceedings immediately. A process server delivered the official 30-day eviction notice to Leo's to my front door the next day. The news, I heard later, sent my entire family into a complete meltdown. Leo was forced to confront the reality that I was not bluffing. He had to pack up his new furniture, his expensive toys, all the trappings of the life he had stolen from me, and move out of the house he had lost. He had to sell his new car. He had to liquidate the assets from his shell corporations to pay the legal fees from his fake bankruptcy and to pay back some of the other people he had conned. The Bank of Clara was closed, and it turns out, I wasn't his only creditor. Without my endless river of money to keep him afloat, his entire house of cards collapsed. It's been a year since that day. I sold the house, after paying the capital gains tax, the proceeds, combined with the small amount my lawyer was able to claw back from Leo's accounts, restored about 90% of my life savings. I used that money to buy a small, sunny condo for myself, a place that is entirely mine, with no ghosts and no bad memories. I have no contact with my brother, the last I heard. He was living in my parents' basement, working some menial job to pay off his debts. His big dreams had finally crashed into the hard reality of consequences. My relationship with my parents is quiet. It's a vast, empty space where a family used to be. They chose their side. They chose the charming, reckless dream over the quiet, responsible reality. They chose the son who took from them over the daughter who tried to give. It's a sad thing to mourn a family while they are still alive, but sometimes it's necessary. My brother's betrayal was the most painful, most devastating event of my life. It took my security, my trust, and for a while, my belief in the goodness of people, but in the end, it gave me something far more valuable. It gave me my strength. It taught me that my responsibility was not a weakness to be exploited, but a superpower. It taught me that my prudence, my diligence, my ability to see the world in clear, undeniable facts, was the sharpest weapon in my arsenal. He tried to con a nurse, not realizing that nurses are experts at spotting lies, at reading the fine print on a chart, at knowing when something is critically, fundamentally wrong. He faked a bankruptcy to steal my savings. But he forgot that a contract is a contract, and sometimes, the fine print can save your life.